France. So let's have a look at the French newspapers. Then Haxi Mayers Belkin discussing them, if you like, for us today. What are they talking about in the papers?
So let's start with 20 Minutes. Their headline reads, "The dawn of the dismantling," set against the rather desolate image of a lone figure and, of course, those temporary shelters that are set to be raised, as you just said. The paper warns of the threat of violence during the camp's evacuation, and as we are seeing now, those threats weren't unfounded. Centre-right Le Figaro's headline reads, "Calais, after the evacuation, the interrogations," a nod to the fact that the dismantling of the jungle is only the start. Thousands of migrants will need to be documented and distributed among reception centres throughout France. And left-wing daily Libération, meanwhile, has opted for a rather different angle. The headline reads, "The evacuation of the jungle, the risks of live reporting," illustrated with a picture of a team of journalists filming in the camp.
Yeah, the paper's calling it rather a media circus, this, in fact, isn't it?
Absolutely. The article claims that some 500 journalists from around the world will be there to witness the camp's destruction today. The paper's editorial draws a parallel with the TV show Loft. That's France's equivalent of Big Brother, the TV show. It asks whether the strong media presence will encourage transparency, especially when it comes to matters of violence and, of course, the police's response to that, or whether it will simply end up serving the government's communication strategy, essentially allowing the socialist government to prove they're taking a hard line.
Now, Haxi's found a piece elsewhere in the paper. It's an article which is entitled "An Operation with 5 Unknowns."
So it's a massive operation, of course, to clear the jungle, according to this article, but there are still enormous questions concerning what comes next. For example, what's going to happen to the 1,500 to 2,000 people who are expected to refuse to be moved? Will they be arrested? Will they be forcibly relocated? But how? This leads on to their second concern. What will the Calais region look like after the next few days? Northern France, due of course to its proximity to the UK, will continue to be a huge magnet for people trying to reach England. How will the police stop migrants simply setting up camp a few kilometres down the coast? How will children be protected? And finally, how will the Interior Ministry ensure that far-right anti-immigrant groups, the paper refers to them ironically as National Front Welcoming Committees, how will the Interior Ministry make sure they don't begin to target migrant reception centres?
Yeah, awful lot of questions, aren't there? A few papers also carrying interviews with the migrants themselves. There's an article that caught your eye. This is in Aujourd'hui en France.
This article sets out the choice faced by migrants very clearly. Either they accept that they'll be rehoused, relocated, or they choose to continue trying their luck outside the official system. Khan, who's a young Afghan boy, is quoted as saying he'd rather continue living outside in the cold and the wind than give up on his dream to reach the UK. The piece also quotes a man from migrant charity Auberge des Migrants, who says that while the government is hoping that by destroying the camp they'll solve the problem of migration, quite simply they're wrong. He says that a large proportion of the people who leave the camp in the coming days will return to Calais, not to mention the fact that there are always new migrants arriving in the town to the tune of about 30 people every single day.
It's a warning we've heard an awful lot, isn't it? And there's a similar piece that you found in Libération as well.
Yeah, if we turn back to page 2 of that paper, we hear from a 66-year-old Bedouin man from Kuwait who says that he won't put up any resistance to being taken to a reception centre, but that he will eventually make his way back to Calais. But we also hear from a 38-year-old man from Sudan called Mohammed. He says that he's happy to let the French government decide what happens next, partly because he no longer has a choice in the matter. He's looking forward to being given a roof over his head, heating, and he says he's optimistic about living somewhere safe from human traffickers, of course, a huge problem in the camp, and thieves.
Of course, the migrant reception centres that Haxi is talking about, very much at the heart, really, of the French government's evacuation plan as well.
Yeah, the Interior Ministry has repeatedly said that the destruction of the jungle camp will be carried out humanely and that all migrants have the unconditional right to be assigned temporary accommodation. But L'Opinion has some questions, unsurprisingly, about just how prepared migrant reception centres are for the imminent influx of very vulnerable people. This piece argues that there is no comprehensive plan in place to welcome refugees and migrants across the country. it reports that different reception centres have different prospective closing dates, and that not all centres are properly equipped to help those people who do want to apply for asylum in France. And of course, with each bed costing around €25 per person per day, just how long will people be allowed to stay? So, of course, as you said earlier, a lot of questions about what comes next for these migrants who are currently, of course, being evacuated from that sprawling migrant camp in Calais.